Welcome back. Many thanks, Maya, for BBC Money Daily. Always great insights, just knowing what's happening in Africa. Let's come back to Kenya, where there is a looming crisis where depositors risk losing up to 8.1 billion Kenya shillings. Gishinga, this is a crisis that is, it is sort of an imminent crisis. We have seen. To just take stock, what should be the guiding principle or policy in investing such kind of huge amounts of money, particularly for depositors? And we have seen this not just in national security funds, we've seen this in other pension funds. We have also seen this in some circles where they go invest in some not so liquid assets, and then things start to thicken. What should be the guiding principle of investing people's money, particularly when we're talking about volumes like 8.1 billion?
Indeed, Brian George, I always say if there's any category of funds that needs to be handled with the utmost care, has to be pension funds, because these are the savings or life savings of workers over 30, 40 years. And they have to be, the highest level of prudence has to be applied. Unfortunately, that's not what we see within the pension industry, where there is that all very familiar game of identifying a piece of property with the landowner, and the land is exaggerated in terms of pricings, then kickbacks go back to the pension trustees, and these are the things really that have complicated the lives of a lot of people. So I think really the regulator, the RBA, they really have to strengthen the governance of our pension funds, because they constitute the largest source of investment funds in the economy. So the guidelines, the prudential guidelines, I think have to be of the highest standards.
Great. So now there has to be a way forward. Of course, investigations are going to start happening soon. We're hopeful that that is going to be the next course of action, particularly from NSSF, if it is not escalated up to the DCI level. But let's not talk about the fate of the depositors. How will they recoup the money? Was there some sort of insurance or something just to assure people that they're not going to lose up to 8.1 billion shillings? Ken, that is not pocket change.
It becomes very, very difficult because the way it's supposed to work is typically the pension funds try to put in this money into these mega real estate projects, and the idea is the rental income that is collected from these real estate projects is what goes to pay off pensioners. But you end up finding that a lot of, sometimes the projects are either white elephants or there's some mismanagement. So you find, for example, the Milimani NSSF houses, they were completed eons ago, but they still remain empty. So you wonder, how will the fund be able to pay for the monthly expenditures of the pensioners? These are pensioners who are aging, they need to go to get health care, they need to support themselves. And that's why you end up with, for example, what you saw at the Telcom pension fund, where you see the pensioners actually stay in those homes without paying any rent. And the argument is that they have put their money into those projects, and if they're not going to get anything from the pension fund, they'll stay in those houses rent-free. And you saw how ugly that became. So I think, it goes back to the RBA, really the industry regulator, in terms of increasing the standards of governance, because this is money that has been saved over very, very many years.
Great, and we hope a solution will be found soon. I want us to touch on another story that we did not air, particularly for the basis of this conversation, but one that has really been on the headlines for quite some time, almost 4 days consecutively, Ken, the competency-based curriculum, which of course has elicited a lot of conversation, not just from parents, but to teachers and also to government officials. People are saying, yes, CBC is good, but there are teething problems that need to be addressed before this is enacted for the benefit of the learners. Let's talk about how to make this work, Ken. There have been countries that have enacted it, and it has worked for them. Examples were given. So how do we, as the Kenyan government, enact this in our context and make it effective for the future human resource of the country? Because a generation is is that we are at risk of, misleading or guiding a generation the right way. You can imagine if the children right now who are learning miss out on the CBC proper enactment, then we are a ticking time bomb.
Well, I think if you look at the philosophy, what they say was the philosophy behind 844 versus CBC, they argue that the 844 curriculum was anchored on really memorizing facts and playing it out in an exam. And they say the problem with that is it doesn't stimulate critical thinking, it doesn't develop competency. And the thinking was behind CBC was, how do you get young people to be more active, to teach themselves through experience. So I think the philosophy sounded very sound. I think, as you said, the implementation, it's much more than a teething problem, because if you really see what's happening on the ground, it's quite difficult in the sense that, first of all, the funding that is needed to sustain it is quite significant, and I don't think the government has committed enough funding towards that, because at some point in the CBC you choose whether you want to take sports direction or performing arts, so you'll need to have like sports academies, you'll need to have theaters. All these require land, require space, require resources. And even on the parent side, the idea that the child has to Google something, it means the parent needs to have that smartphone, which is not the case for every parent in Kenya. So I think there is that mismatch that has to be fixed. But I think the philosophy of making children more creative, more independent, more well-rounded, and looking at their gifts and talents, I think it seems like a sound philosophy.
Great. Many thanks, Ken Gishinga, my panelist right here, my resident panelist right here on Biz Chat Weekly, our weekly segment whereby we just talk about the stories that made the headlines in the week in the world of business. Many thanks. We'll be having him again next week on Friday, talking about stories that would have made headlines next week. Next week, you'll be here with Noah Kipkemboy. That's where we rest it on business today. Many thanks for your splendid company as we brought you the latest in your economy and also abroad. Up next is Mbiu ya KTN. I am Brian Jodotieno. Enjoy the rest.